Welcome back and thank you for staying with us. As a country, we tend to refuse to learn from history. Hence, we usually find ourselves in situations where ugly things are repeated. The ruling People's Democratic Party in Adamawa State may go into the 2023 general elections with a divided house if the party's national leadership fails to address the fallout of the state's primaries. An aggrieved aspirant, Ambassador Abubakar Jamilu Waziri, has gone to court to challenge his alleged exclusion from the state governorship primaries of the PDP. Other aspirants are also threatening to leave the party, despite recent reconciliation efforts by a committee set up by Governor Ahmadu Fintiri to consider positions of the aggrieved aspirants. Let's share that story with you, as found by TVC News correspondent Owolabi Adenusi.
This may not be the best of times for the People's Democratic Party in Adamawa State, which is now embroiled in internal crisis after its primaries. As a result, PDP and Independent National Electoral Commission have been dragged to the Federal High Court in Abuja by Ambassador Abubakar Jamilu Waziri, a gubernatorial aspirant who, despite being cleared by the PDP national hierarchy, was excluded in the primaries that produced Governor Ahmadu Fintiri. His prayers are that he should be declared winner or that the electoral umpire conduct fresh primaries to usher in popular candidates. Ambassador Jamilu Waziri is not only aggrieved, as majority of PDP aspirants from the State House of Assembly to National Assembly are still aggrieved over what they describe as imposition of candidate by the party leader, Governor Ahmadu Fintiri. Some aggrieved aspirants shared their experiences with TVC News on the controversial primaries and the intrigue that followed.
We are aggrieved because of the nature of the primaries that was conducted in Adamawa State on the 22nd of May 2022. And what has made us to be aggrieved was because the primaries was not held under a democratic atmosphere whereby things should be run free and fair for all aspirants contesting to be able to go into a contest and come out with a unanimous candidate that everybody will support. At the end of the day, the primaries was manipulated to the interest of specific individuals and party men that were unpicked by either party leadership or the state governor. And at the end of the day, all other party aspirants that used their hard-earned money, used their supporters, had goodwill in their parties and constituencies, we are now screened out of the process, even after being legally screened by the party to now go into contest. So because democratic tenets were not being upheld and the primaries was flawed, it has made us feel aggrieved because we are edged out. Not because we are not favorable, not because we are not popular, but because this issue of anointed candidates had been taken over and above board. And at the end of the day, it defeated the essence of the primary election, of bringing out the best that can contest and have the flag of the party to stand against any other party in the general election, so that a party that is more popular and the candidate that is more popular can win. So we are aggrieved because we've been edged out politically.
Part of the reason why PDP lost election in 2019 is because of lack of internal democracy. Because during the primaries, unpopular candidates were given tickets, denying those that are popular. So at the end of the day, that from the primaries, it went to the general election because people were aggrieved, people were not happy with the way things were done, and in that they voted against the party. So, and I believe in every democracy, inter-democracy matters a lot. Why there's no inter-democracy, at the end of the day, you hardly get the result. Party colors and gave us the assurance that there's going to be free and fair primaries. Everybody will be given equal opportunity to participate in the primaries. But to be honest, that is not what transpired in the party. From the process of selecting the delegate, the delegates were given to just certain individuals that the party want to favor also. Delegates were to be democratically elected from the ward. That was not done. So the list were given to those that will be favored. They sit down and pencil the names of their cronies. And as a contestant, if you don't have access to delegate, there's no way you go to the primaries and have any vote, because already the votes were given to one single individual. That was what happened. We show our grievances. We've written to the party. We have written to the there's a reconciliation committee that was set up. We have written to them our position as members of the party. We want the right thing to be done so that it will serve as a deterrent to those coming behind. You know, if we continue like that, our democracy will never grow in this country.
We, the aggrieved one, we put our heads together, coming up together, so that we ensure that we are together in taking decisions. Secondly, for the government, fortunately for them, they have already set up a committee to reconcile, a reconciliatory committee by the government. So they are inviting the aggrieved parties, the aggrieved people, local government by local government. They are still on it, especially my own local government area, Jada. We were invited. We went to the reconciliatory committee members. We spoke our mind to them vividly.
Some of the view that the Zamfara experience may be repeated in the state if right steps is not adopted by the national leadership of the PDP.
When political issues are not handled well, it leads to an outburst. It's like when you beat a child and you don't allow the child to cry. The child will now have to be holding the pain within himself, and you become very, very repulsive. The party as it is lost election in 2015 because of lack of internal mechanisms that were not handled well. This time around, it is repeating itself, particularly in Adamawa State. Adamawa got PDP into power because there was a free and fair election in 2019. But the process has changed. To lay a foundation to people that have left, you know, before even some people went to the courts, some left because after the primaries, they didn't feel it was conducted well, so they left immediately because they didn't even have the energy to go to court. Some have jumped ship to other parties. Those that have still believed that in the party stayed and wanted to go and fight their rights in the court. Some of us that are still in the party are remaining faithful because we want to exhaust internal mechanisms. And that was why most of us that are under these auspices of the House of Assembly aggrieved PDP members or aspirants stayed in the party, and we looked for a way to ventilate those avenues. We've had our first summit on the 26th of July, where all of us, 108 of us, came for a meeting. We discussed the experiences of the primaries, and we now said we want to have a resolution that we'll present to the governor. We did that to the office of the chairman of the party. We did that to the committee that had been set by the governor in the reconciliation processes that is still ongoing. Until date, I'm telling you now, is 3 months down the line since the primaries, and since when we have been exhausting these avenues. Till date, nothing has happened. So you see, if people begin to get angry and begin to do some funny things that may be seen or termed as anti-party activities or see-don't-look approach, it may end up affecting the fortunes of the party. But if the party knows what to do in the right time to assuage people, pacify them well, and make them know that everybody is a stakeholder in this process, and we feel comfortable with those processes, I feel it will now help the fortunes of the party to win the elections in the general elections coming next year. And if you don't sort out these things before the campaigns commence immediately, people will become busy that will not have time for sorting out issues.
Meanwhile, Governor Ahmadu Fintiri has distanced himself from the plight of the aggrieved members, saying that the primaries was the sole responsibility of the party. His Director General on Media and Publicity, Solomon Kumanga, insists that the governor, as the leader of the party, has constituted a reconciliation committee charged to heal the wounds of the aggrieved members.
Governor Fintiri is a Democrat who has not imposed his will on any of the candidates that have emerged during the primaries. However, be that as it is, since it's a democratic process, the losers are bound to feel aggrieved and to assume that somebody somewhere else is responsible for their own failure in the primaries. However, in view of these facts and in view of the fact that the governor is a Democrat, he has set up a high-powered committee to reconcile and also reach out to aggrieved members, especially those people who lost out in the primaries, both in the National Assembly primaries and the State House of Assembly primaries, to ensure that the party goes on into the election and into the campaigns as one solid, indivisible family. And as we are talking to you today, almost about 17 local government areas have been reached by this committee, and in a couple of weeks they will present their report, after which all the aggrieved members, all the aggrieved stakeholders will come together and now move ahead as one happy family.
The governor added that as a Democrat, he has no power to stop the court case instituted by the aggrieved to challenge the primaries. He, however, appealed to the members to channel their grievances through party mechanism.
Governor, as a Democrat, cannot stop you from going to court if you feel aggrieved. But in democracy such as this, each and every person should endeavor to explore and exploit the internal mechanism of the party before going to court. Because if you take somebody to court, there's a tendency that there's a tendency that the division within the party will be exacerbated.
The former Vice President Atiku Abubakar, in a rally in Adamawa State, appealed to the electorate to give Governor Fintiri a second chance.
All right, definitely not the best of time for PDP in Adamawa State. To be killed.
Yeah, from the look of things, some powerful people in the PDP made up their minds that Governor Fintiri must be the sole aspirant. So they made sure that no one contested against him. And in doing this, they went against their own party guidelines. They went against the Electoral Act. This is the source of the problem. You can't have a situation in which you disqualified someone illegally. The person then proceeded to appeal. Every party conducting a primary election sets up an appeal committee to address grievances of the aspirants. They set up the appeal committee. The appeal committee cleared that person who was disqualified from contesting. That's Ambassador MJZ Abaka Waziri, a former chief protocol officer to President Goodluck Jonathan. Now, against the decision of the appeal committee that cleared him to contest, because what they claimed was that he was not paying his dues. But his local government chapter of the APC proceeded to provide evidence that he was paying his dues. So the appeal panel had no choice but to say he is fit to contest. Only for the National Working Committee of the party to refuse to implement the decision of the appeal panel. This is impunity of the crudest form. And it's such a shame that our politicians, our political parties never learn. In Anambra State, the APC conducted what it called primaries. They conducted a joke that they called gubernatorial primaries. And Andy Uba emerged as the winner of the fake governorship primaries of the APC, what did we see? Andy Uba was taken to court, the party was taken to court, and the courts ruled right up to the apex court of our land, the Supreme Court, that Andy Uba emerged from an illegal primary, a process that was in contravention of the Electoral Act as well as the party's guidelines. Therefore, the Supreme Court affirmed that Andy Uba was not even a candidate in the election that he already lost. So the Supreme Court ordered INEC to delete Andy Uba's name from his records as having contested. You can imagine, which means that if APC had won that election, that's how they would have been disqualified, and the party that came second will have taken it just the way it happened in Bayelsa. And before it got to this point, Ambassador Waziri even filed an injunction seeking to stop the process and ensure that the court ruled that he must participate in the process. But in spite of being served the court processes, they went ahead with the sham that they called primary election. I've never seen where politicians are as greedy for power and are extremely selfish as we have in our country. And they don't learn. We saw what happened in Zamfara. What happened in Zamfara? You claim that, what happened in Zamfara was the case of everybody agreeing to consensus. But as we later discovered, 3 different groups were pulling in different directions. They didn't agree. And what the law says is that even if one candidate or one aspirant says, I disagree, then you must go through an election. The consensus agreement has failed. But 3 different groups, 3 different factions within Zamfara APC did not agree to the idea. The governor was playing his own game. The national leadership too was trying to impose their own candidates. At the end of the day, APC lost from a winning position. This sort of thing could happen to them again in Adamawa. If Ambassador Waziri is able to prove that indeed he was cheated. Because you can say that, party primaries are the internal affairs of political parties. But the law must be complied with. And it's designed in such a way so that even though it's your internal affairs, you must ensure a level playing field. You must ensure that even your own laws, your own guidelines, and the Electoral Act and the Constitution of our country is followed. Where it's not followed, the courts have an obligation to say, okay, this whole process we cancel. So that's there are other grounds. Maybe as we go on, I will explain further.
Will history repeat itself in Adamawa State?
It depends on the aggrieved candidates and also the stand of the judiciary on the matter. Because as he has rightly put it, this is common to politicians in our own climb, and because they get away with this kind of impunity, it keeps repeating itself, and you will be surprised that even the party members sometimes they contribute to this level of impunity across party level. But I believe that until we begin to take steps to sanitize the process, we will keep on getting this kind of thing. This kind of thing will keep repeating itself. Now, why am I saying that? If it is possible for PDP to sort itself out, which can be done in different ways that may not even be palatable, you know, they move on, and another season comes, the same thing repeats itself. But if the aggrieved people can stand their ground and allow the process to run through, to run through the judicial process, then you know that parties can learn from their failures. For me, it's because the processes, the legal processes, have not been allowed to run through most of the time. That is why this kind of impunity keeps repeating itself from time to time. So, yes, depending on the candidates, history can repeat itself. So, but we only need to wait and see.
All right, I have this very vital question, because if the party does not want other aspirants to run against incumbent governors outside of whatever is happening in Adamawa State now, why allow them to spend enormous money on buying forms and paying several obligatory dues?
Good question, because in Anambra, the Supreme Court ordered the party to refund to the appellant what was taken from him by way of expression of money for expression of interest form. Because what is the point? You made up your mind that only one person will contest against himself, and but you go ahead and take money from so many people. You know, I still don't even believe that Fintiri cannot on his own win a primary election. Why the desperation to get somebody out of the contest? Was the governor simply afraid that, these people could gang up and then he will be defeated? Was he afraid of his own shadow, or he didn't think that he had played the role of a team player in this last almost 4 years, to the point that his own people can gang up against him? It's difficult to defeat an incumbent in a flat-out primary election like the ones we have in our country. Yet, you still now go against the law just to achieve your aim of ensuring that nobody stands against him. Who is he that nobody should stand against him? Who is a governor? Is a governor God that no one should stand against him? People that he can defeat? So these parties, sometimes you wonder what really is their problem. Because this kind of problems that they are creating are needless. Look at the NWC of the PDP saying that it can play other people's roles in an emergency. How was that primary election an emergency affair? Then you set up an appeal panel. The appeal panel said this person was validly cleared to contest. It rubbished the grounds upon which he was disqualified and said he's free to contest. Yet you still refuse to let him take part in the contest. How can we grow our democracy when people have this kind of mindset that they are bigger than the rest of us, that it is what they want that must happen? I mean, people need to stop this kind of behavior. You will see, even in the APC, in some of the states, the crisis that greedy politicians created is going to cause the party to lose some states. So I'm not surprised. Beyond even parties, beyond even agree people ganging up and all that, you can even lose in the courts.
Absolutely.
Because if the courts deem your action to be against the rights of the aspirant, he can take a decision by saying, look, what you conducted was not a primary election, which was what happened in Anambra. They claimed that, hundreds of thousands of people took part in the sham primary election, conducted by a governor, because what the parties do is they post governors to go and conduct primaries. And those primaries, at the end of the day, you will see that they do not even follow due process. How can a governor feel proud to preside over a non-event? What's going on?
All right, welcome back. This is still Journalist Hangouts. Now, joining us via Zoom for more insight on this issue is a lawyer and advocate for good governance, justice, and equity, Libras Oshoma. Thank you for joining us, Libras. Good evening.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thank you. Good evening.
All right.
And good evening to Titoju and the other guest that I didn't get his name, but I think I know the voice.
Good evening. All right. Tell us, what does the Electoral Act say about issue of exclusion and disqualification of aspirants by political parties?
Yeah. I think you're talking about section 84(3) of the Electoral Act. The essence, let me quickly read that section. It says a political party shall not impose nomination, qualification, or disqualification criteria, measure, or conditions on any aspirant or candidate for any election in its constitution, guideline, or rules for nomination of candidate for election, except as prescribed under section 65, 66, 106, 107, 131, 137, 177, and 187 of the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, 1999, as amended. I think what that section is actually trying to cure is a situation where the Electoral Act, create the Constitution of the party create guidelines that are not part of the guidelines prescribed in the Constitution. And we all know that the guideline prescribed in the Constitution is that, one, you must have reached the age of qualification. You also must have the necessary credentials, in this case, for governorship, presidents, and deputy governor and vice president, school SAT, or its equivalent. You must not be a bankrupt, you must not be an ex-convict, and all of those criteria. So the Electoral Act is simply saying that the guideline of the political party or its constitution for qualification or disqualification must not conflict with the provisions of the provisions laid down for qualification or disqualification by the Constitution. And so we all know any guideline that is laid down in the rules of the party or the constitution of the party that is contrary to the rules already laid down by the Constitution, to the extent of its inconsistency, is therefore null and void. It's only here that when issues like that happen, we now begin to go to court to litigate matters that are already clear. Your guidelines for qualification for election must be the guideline already laid down in the Constitution. That's what that section is basically saying.
Okay. Where a party duly constitutes an appeals committee or an appeals panel, and the appeal panel says cleared to contest, does the National Working Committee of the party have the power, without stating its own reasons for disqualifying the candidate, then proceed to disqualify?
The first and foremost, the guidelines of the political party for qualification or disqualification must be so clear as laid down in the Constitution. What it means is that, first and foremost, it is the guideline that is in the Constitution that guides qualification or disqualification. Any other guideline or rules and regulation imposed by the party, it's null and void. It's a nullity. Then secondly, the essence of an appeal committee, is to look at the irregularities that had been taken in the process of screening candidates for election, verification. And a screening committee really is to verify credentials that had been, essence of a screening committee is to verify credentials that had been presented by candidates. And if the candidate feels that justice had not been done in the process of screening, he has a right by the party rules to appeal to an appeal committee. The appeal committee, once the appeal committee gives a decision, it is not in the body of the National Working Committee now to begin to sit on appeal over the decision of the appeal committee. So once an appeal committee gives a decision on screening of candidates, that decision is final. If there would be any review on such, it is not in the National Working Committee to so do. And once they do that, and the matter gets to court, automatically I know the court is going to void such decision. And even if, assuming without conceding that that is the position, it is you cannot disqualify a candidate without stating the reasons for disqualification, yes, which must be contained in the provisions laid down or in the Constitution and as prescribed by Section 84(3) of the Electoral Act. So you don't just say because I don't like, otherwise you can just wake up and say, I don't like the face of Babajide Otitoju, so he's hereby disqualified. And that was what cost the APC the election in Edo State. If you remember, the APC, because of the problem, the internal problem of between the sitting governor and the national chairman, then national chairman of the party, they created stumbling block to ensure that the candidate, is not screened or qualified from standing for election, despite having screened him in his first term on the basis of these same credentials. And when the matter eventually, though, went to court, but he had left the party, the court said that the party didn't have, such powers to so do. Even the matter of certificate forgery and the rest went to court. And the Supreme Court came down heavily, on the applicant. So in the same vein, the National Working Committee does not have the power to so do once the screening committee has cleared a candidate. It is not within the powers of the National Working Committee to sit down in their office and begin to sit on appeal over decisions taken by the appeal committee.
Why do our politicians behave in this manner? I have my reasons, but I don't know whether my reasons are your own reasons. Why do you know what the law says? It's not as if you have the judiciary in your pocket and you risk bringing down the roof by recklessly going against your own electoral guidelines and even the Electoral Act and the Constitution. Why do they behave in this manner?
Yeah, that's we all know why they behave that way, because two reasons. We have been so weaponized by the politicians with poverty that we see politics. Everybody now see politics as a way out of this poverty, and as a way to becoming relevant. And that is why our governors become emperor, our political office holders who are supposed to be serving us, we end up serving them. And so when that happens, and then there's psychophancy, there's so much psychophancy because of hunger. So the politicians, assume a larger than life image. And what they do, they circumvent the law and tell you to go to court, knowing fully well also that the windmill of justice grind here slowly, but we say surely. But we forget that justice delayed is justice denied, which was the reason for the amendments to the Constitution and the Electoral Act to abridge the time for electoral matters. That is why even if you get to the Supreme Court today, most of the cases that you have at the Supreme Court are pre-election matters. Immediately after the primaries, INEC issued a press release that they were defending about 335 cases because of so many irregularities, orchestrated by the politicians. So one would have expected that in some of these cases, the rules are clear. And then lastly, because there are no penalties, in cases where even the law comes down heavily, the court comes down heavily, like the case of Anambra that you cited, when the court, did instruct that political parties should refund money. How many of these laws, these judgments are obeyed? They are obeyed in default. And so you find out that the judgments are hardly executed. The courts cannot on their own go all out to begin to execute the orders that are made. You still have the executive people, people in the executive who are part of the system, who are part of the impunity, being those that will execute court judgment. So that is why you find in some cases, a governor will tell you, we are still studying the judgments. In some cases, they tell you, well, we will obey the judgment, as if it's in their mouth to say they will not obey. So that's the unfortunate situation we find ourselves. The police is not independent, that is supposed to execute some of these judgments. Even the Attorney General, in some cases, that should be executing some of these judgments, also is an arm and a leg of the government in some cases. So you see everybody look the other way. That's why, and when in the absence of the power of an independent power to execute court judgment, it becomes impunity reigns supreme. That's why in most cases, as I tell you, some political parties are not going to feed candidates in this forthcoming election because of some of these crises that we see play out. Where look at Akwa Ibom, look at Adamawa, look at Delta State, look at Borno State. The impunity is just everywhere. It is part of this impunity that makes us consistently amend our Electoral Act to begin to make laws on issues that ordinarily should be left to discretion.
All right, Mr. Libras, I would like to ask you before we let you go, what is your message to all political parties concerning exclusion and disqualification of aspirants?
Yeah, my message to them is the fact that the rules have been laid down. The only way we can be respected among Community of Nations, and when we go out, people will see us truly as practicing democracy, is to play by the rules. Today, you are on the table. Tomorrow, you can be outside of the door. And this same impunity, this same precedent that you set today in disobedience to the rule would then certainly be used against you. So let's not create a do-or-die situation where Nigerians are not known to observe the rules. Simple cases, let's not end up going to court over matters that are clear. And that's why you see, just like Eleke debate, INEC keep innovating to say, okay, we want to innovate a technology that will ensure that you cannot circumvent the process. Until we get to that level also, and if the politicians do not change, then it will become unfortunate and will just become a laughingstock in the Committee of Nations. And then some of them, their actions and inaction might cost their political party, the ticket. And I also want to appeal to Nigerians that we should no longer sentimentally follow politicians, but consistently ask about antecedents, what they have done and what they can do.
All right. Thank you very much, Mr. Libras Oshoma, for sharing your time with us on this particular discussion. Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
Mr. Libras Oshoma is a lawyer and advocate for good governance, justice, and equity. Thank you very much.